Hello and welcome to Unacademy, a one-stop destination for the English medium civil services aspirants. A very good morning and welcome to the daily Hindu news analysis. So let's begin today's discussion by first looking at the topics that we are going to discuss. From the international edition of the Hindu, I have chosen 7 important articles for a detailed analysis. So let's take up these topics one by one, and if you guys are liking these initiatives, do express your support with your likes, your comments, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Before we start the discussion, please note that as part of Conquer Prelims crash course, which is being held in 2 phases, under the static part of the crash course, today I shall be taking up session 4 for international relations at 6 p.m. which will be live on the Unacademy app, where we are going to discuss the most important static topics for the upcoming prelims from international relations. And as part of phase 2 of the crash course, where we are covering the most important current affairs of the last 18 months, today Shyam sir will be starting with the economy current affairs. Today would be the first session for Indian economy. These sessions will be live on our YouTube channel at 7:30 p.m. Is that clear? So do attend these sessions without fail, especially if you're appearing for the upcoming prelims. And to access these classes, both which are happening on the app and our YouTube channel, the easiest way is to join our Telegram channel. Just search for Unacademy IAS English or scan the QR code, join the Telegram channel, and we shall share the session links so that you can easily access these classes. So let's begin with today's discussion by first looking at this article from page number 8. This column evaluates the trade deal that India signed with EFTA countries. Of course, this is a topic that we have studied in the past as well, but there are some very interesting insights brought out through this article. The writer is talking about few lessons for India when it comes to negotiating a free trade agreement. And the writer says that there are certain new approaches that India has been following in its trade negotiations with other countries. So that is why the topic becomes very, very important. So first, let's begin with the basics. Let's understand the context. Recently, a month ago, India signed a historic trade deal with a group of countries called the EFTA, or the European Free Trade Association. Now, the EFTA is distinct from the European Union. The European Union is a political economic grouping representing the Europe region. There are 27 member states. They have their own single market and relaxed border controls. But apart from the EU, there is a distinct trade association called EFTA, which includes 4 countries which are not part of the European Union. This includes Norway, Switzerland, Iceland, and Liechtenstein. You can see here in the map which 4 countries are members of EFTA. They are not part of European Union, but they do work with European Union closely. They are part of the EU single market. They are part of the Schengen zone as well, where the border controls are removed to facilitate the free movement of people. But however, they are not part of the common customs union the EU has created. So these 4 countries have their own trade association, the EFTA, and this group was established through the Stockholm Convention in 1960. Since 2013, India was negotiating a trade deal with EFTA countries, because some of these countries are important trade partners and investors for India. For example, if you look at Switzerland, Switzerland is a very important market for Indian exports. Plus, a lot of Swiss investments comes into India either as FDI or as FII. Norway is a key partner. Norway is an important market for Indian exports. Plus, Norway trades with India and brings investments into the Indian market. There are several Norwegian companies that operate in India, especially in the clean energy, renewable energy sector. So we do have very good trade and investment relations with Norway as well. So these 4 countries have a lot to offer for India. They could provide us their markets, give us market access so that our exports can increase, and they can bring investments into India, which can benefit these countries as well, their companies as well, but it could benefit India because the investments could help in capital creation. It could drive job creation as well and create several job opportunities in the country. So it's a win-win deal for both the sides. So since 2013, they were negotiating the trade deal, and recently the trade deal was finalized. Now, this is a very big development because right before the elections, right before the election season could begin, the trade deal was finalized. So this FTA is officially called the TEPA, Trade and Economic Partnership Agreement. That is the official name of the trade deal that India and EFTA countries have signed. Now, let me introduce you to the most important features of the trade deal. Based on that, we'll carry out a discussion to understand India's approach towards negotiating FTAs. Because we are currently in the process of negotiating FTAs with other European partners as well. For example, India and United Kingdom have been negotiating an FTA since few years. India and European Union have been negotiating a BTIA, a broad-based trade and investment agreement, which is a FTA with the EU. And these negotiations have been going on at least since 15 years. And we still haven't been able to finalize a trade deal with the European Union. So given these ongoing negotiations with UK and EU, the trade deal with EFTA becomes important. You can draw lessons from here. You can understand India's approach towards FTAs over the last 2 decades. The writer is actually providing us a very good analysis about India's approach towards free trade agreements. The writer divides India's FTA approach into 3 distinct phases. For example, in the early 2000s, almost 15-20 years ago, India signed several FTAs with a few Southeast Asian and East Asian countries, with Japan, Malaysia, with the ASEAN group. So then our approach towards FTA was slightly different. So based on that experience and the lessons learned, India adopted a new approach towards the other countries with whom we signed FTAs in the recent past. For example, in 2022, 2 years ago, we signed FTAs with United Arab Emirates. We signed a limited trade deal with Australia. We signed an FTA with Mauritius as well. So you see a different approach with these FTAs that were signed. But if you compare all these with the trade deal signed with EFTA countries, there is an entirely different approach. A very distinct approach is being noted on India's part when it comes to the TEPA that we have signed with the EFTA countries. So that is what the writer is evaluating. It helps us understand the approach of India, and the writer is providing few suggestions as far as the future FTAs that we are going to sign are concerned. So if you look at the TEPA, there are 14 chapters that deal with various aspects of trade and investment. For example, on market access, there is an entire chapter on market access that determines the kind of market access that Indian exporters will have towards the EFTA markets, or the kind of market access that EFTA countries will have into the Indian market. Because see, the purpose of any free trade agreement, the core purpose is to reduce the barriers to trade. When it comes to foreign trade or trade between 2 countries, there will be certain barriers to trade. Usually, these barriers can be classified into 2 separate categories. There could be tariff-based barriers, that is, barriers related to high taxation. If tariffs, duties, custom duties, for example, import duties, if such tariffs are very high, that becomes a trade barrier, a tariff-based trade barrier. Another type of trade barrier is a non-tariff barrier. Any other barrier which is not related to tariffs. It could be the different regulatory policies of the 2 countries. It could be the lack of connectivity, lack of infrastructure, strict visa immigration policies. So any other issue which is not related to tariff, which is non-tariff, becomes a non-tariff barrier. So the core purpose of any trade agreement or any FTA is to reduce these barriers to trade, to reduce the tariffs, to bring down the import custom duties. Sometimes duty-free access is also given, so that there is a free flow of goods between the two sides. It could cover services as well. Such an agreement can cover both goods and services, providing free movement by reducing the tariffs. So such a trade agreement can focus on the non-tariff barriers as well, to synchronize the laws and policies and regulations, to establish common standards, quality standards. Then to ensure that intellectual property laws, competition related laws are in synchronization between the two countries, so that there is an easy way to trade with the other country and easy way to bring investments into the other country. So such FTAs can extend to cover investments and even the movement of people. For trade to flourish, there has to be movement of people, easy movement of people, especially the traders, businessmen, etc. If they can move around easily, even tourists, if they can move around easily between two countries, right? If there are relaxed visa immigration laws and policies, that will facilitate the free movement of people as well. So that is the essential purpose of any FTA, to reduce these barriers to trade, to facilitate the free movement of goods, services, investments, and people. Now, the exact details of an FTA will depend on what is negotiated between two partners. So in the case of India and EFTA, market access was a priority to ensure that Indian goods and even services will have great market access into these countries, because that could boost our exports. Similarly, the EFTA countries also would want certain degree of market access into India, so they can export their goods and services to India. So there is an entire chapter on rules of origin as well. Rules of origin is a very important requirement under FTAs to ensure that no third country or third party misuses the FTA. Because the benefits of a FTA is meant only for the exporters of both the sides. That is, Indian exporters and EFTA exporters, only they should benefit. What if a third country, an exporter from a third country, what if they push the product into these countries and bring it to India through the FTA route? So that is a misuse of the FTA that exists between two trading partners. So a third country could possibly misuse this. So to prevent that, you need to have rules of origin requirement. You need to establish what percentage of the value addition was carried out on a particular good produced in these countries. You should set a minimum threshold. Only if they can establish that certain value addition was done within these countries that are part of the trade deal, only then the FTA benefits will apply. So if someone is just trying to re-export the same goods from a third country to the other country by misusing the FTA, they will not pass the rules of origin requirement, and those goods will not enjoy the benefits of FTA. So it helps in protecting your market. It helps in cutting out any cheap imports coming in from other countries, third countries. So that is part of the trade deal. Then the sanitary, phytosanitary measures. Usually developed countries like European countries, they expect very high hygiene standards and quality standards when it comes to food items, when it comes to drugs, medicines, pharmaceutical commodities. They expect very high sanitary, phytosanitary measures, which might be difficult for a developing nation like India to meet. If we try to enforce those strict hygiene and quality standards, it might impact our domestic producers. So there is always a difference between developed and developing countries when it comes to hygiene, sanitary and phytosanitary measures. But India has managed to work out a middle ground with EFTA countries. Without compromising our domestic producers, we have agreed for a mutual set of sanitary, phytosanitary measures. We have also reached a middle ground on intellectual property rights. IPR is another contentious issue between developed and developing nations. When it comes to trade-related issues, between developed and developing countries, IPR is always a major flashpoint. Because developed countries will insist on very strict enforcement of IP laws. Because most of their companies will own all the intellectual property. They would like to monetize that, they would like to benefit from that. But in developing nations like India, it might be difficult to strictly enforce their standards of IP rights and IP laws. So this always leads to friction as well when it comes to trade. So with EFTA countries, we have reached a middle ground to satisfy both the sides. So it is a well-negotiated agreement that could benefit both the parties. Now, the best part about the trade deal is that India has managed to work out a commitment, a legal commitment from the EFTA countries. Let me explain this. As part of the trade agreement that we have signed, EFTA countries are legally obligated. Under the agreement, they are legally obligated, it's a binding commitment on them, to bring $100 billion investments into India over the next 15 years through the FDI route. It will not cover foreign portfolio investment or institutional investment, which goes into your capital markets. That is not covered. Direct FDI from these 4 countries should come to $100 billion in the next 15 years. So basically around $50 billion in the next 10 years and another $50 billion in the subsequent 5 years. So totally in the next 15 years, they are committed. It's a legal obligation on them to bring $100 billion worth investments into India. Is that clear? Now this is a concession that India has extracted from these countries. Now the question is, how will this benefit India? This will enormously benefit India because $100 billion worth of investments will create capital assets in the country, long-lasting assets. It will create jobs. In fact, the goal of the trade agreement is to generate 1 million direct jobs in India through investment of $100 billion. Now you might ask, what will those countries gain? Why will they bring $100 billion to India to create jobs in India? They will gain market access. That is the leverage for us. India is one of the largest markets in the world. So India has promised market access to their companies, which will increase their access to the Indian market. And in return, they bring investments, create jobs in India, which is a win-win situation for both the sides. But what is unique is that irrespective of the trade volume, right, irrespective of how the FTA will perform, these countries now have a binding obligation to bring $100 billion into India in the next 15 years. So this is a clear signal about the new approach that India has been following when it comes to trade negotiations. On all other issues like IP laws, be it competition-related issues and other trade facilitation-related issues, India-EFTA countries, they have reached a middle path, a middle ground, which satisfies both the sides. And with regard to the IP laws, we have met the WTO standards. Both sides have agreed as per the TRIPS provisions, right, under the WTO, and similar standards have been adopted. So it's a give and take, essentially. You give something to get something in return. That's how diplomacy works. That's how any trade agreement will work. So here, let's understand the first approach of India towards FTAs. 20 years ago, 15, 20 years ago, when we signed few FTAs with other countries, what was our approach? Then we'll compare it with the recent FTAs we have signed with UAE, Australia, which is the second approach of India, the 2.0. And the writer then talks about a 3.0, a new approach that is necessary to streamline the trade agreements that we are signing with other countries. So let's take a look at this. So as I told you, in the early 2000s, India signed several FTAs with Japan, with Malaysia, with the entire ASEAN group, even with Singapore and others, with South Korea. So primarily with Southeast Asian, East Asian countries as part of the Look East policy. India signed several important trade agreements, free trade agreements. So back then, the approach that India followed was that trade and investment are inextricably linked. In fact, this is the general economic understanding as well, that your trade issues and investment related issues are always connected. In any trade deal with any country, apart from addressing the trade related issues, investment related issues will also be addressed in the same agreement. So this is how FTAs are usually negotiated. This was India's approach as well in the initial days. There was a clear linkage between trade and investment. Trade is about the trade in goods and services, right? Investment is about bringing FDI and FII investments. So both were seen as interconnected, interlinked. So if there were trade concessions given by one partner, the other would promise investments and vice versa. If one would promise investments, they would get market access to increase the trade into that country. So this is how FTAs were generally negotiated. That is a common underlying economic principle as well that defines most free trade agreements in the world. So India followed the same approach. This was our 1.0 approach, the initial approach. But later India felt that some of the trade deals did not really benefit India. India had a very bitter experience with some FTAs, especially with ASEAN. India felt that these countries got better benefits. They could flood their products into the Indian market, right? And the cheap imports coming in apparently hurt domestic industries in India. For example, under India-ASEAN FTA, a lot of agricultural commodities flooded the Indian market. For example, a cheaper coffee from Vietnam, better coconut-based products from Thailand and Indonesia. So this apparently hurt the domestic producers in India. Similarly, in various MSME sectors as well. Cheaper products, better quality products flooded the Indian market, and domestic producers were hurt apparently. So given this bitter experience that India had with some of the FTAs, India tried to change its approach in the next few years. In fact, for few years, we stopped negotiating FTAs. After the bitter experience with ASEAN and even with the other countries, with Korea, Japan, Malaysia as well, because of their manufacturing potential, right, and the inherent edge they had in certain areas, they benefited more from these FTAs where trade and investment were linked together. There was no promise on investment, no legal commitment on investment, but they benefited in the trade area. And given that India was weaker in agriculture, in manufacturing, we could never increase our trade to that extent. Of course, we benefited, but not to the extent that the other parties were benefiting. So India felt that these FTAs were one-sided. Understood? So this was the initial approach. And for some years, we took a break from signing FTAs. The government hesitated from negotiating free trade agreements because of that bitter experience we had with some of the FTAs. Then came the second approach, the 2.0 approach. Under this approach, India pioneered a new initiative where we decoupled trade and investment in FTAs. Usually, countries don't do that. They treat trade and investment together as interconnected in any trade agreement. But for the first time, when we signed FTAs with Australia, Mauritius, and especially United Arab Emirates, during these FTA negotiations, India decoupled trade and investment. Essentially, irrespective of what happens in the trade domain, these countries, some of them are obligated to bring investments into India. For example, look at the trade deal we signed with United Arab Emirates 2 years ago in 2022. Under the trade deal, the UAE has a commitment to bring billions of dollars worth of investment into India to create jobs in India. But trade has been treated separately. They have given almost duty-free access to each other. For most of the goods which are traded between India and UAE, duty-free access has been provided. This will benefit the labor-intensive sectors in India. Gems, jewelry, leather, textiles. So that will create lakhs of jobs in the Indian market. Plus UAE also benefits. It wants good investment destination like India. So by bringing investments into India, UAE will benefit as well. Plus it will help create assets in India, it will create jobs in India, and it will drive the trade between the two sides while bringing investments. So what India has done in the second approach, in the 2.0 approach, is that we have decoupled, de-linked trade and investment. Understood? So we have pushed these countries to bring investments to India, irrespective of what happens in trade. So trade has been dealt separately, investment has been dealt separately. We have even signed separate agreements for that under the comprehensive trade deals. But however, now with EFTA, if you look at the TEPA agreement, the Trade Economic Partnership Agreement that we have signed, it appears that India is going back to the earlier approach. It appears that India is reverting back to the 1.0 approach where we saw both trade and investment together. Let's understand this. If you look at the trade deal we are negotiating with UK, which is still an ongoing process, So here as well, we have decoupled trade and investment. We are looking at trade and investment as two separate entities, and we are negotiating two separate treaties for that. This has been the current approach, the 2.0 approach of India, where we have decoupled trade and investment. But interestingly, if you look at the TEPA that we have signed, the India-EFTA TEPA, there is no decoupling which has been done. It is one comprehensive treaty where we have used trade as a leverage to place a legal obligation on EFTA countries to provide investment to India. We have promised market access to these companies. We have promised great market access to EFTA countries, and we have pushed them to legally invest. It's a commitment on them to bring $100 billion into India. So that is a leverage, the trade advantages we have, right? Plus, we will also get better market access that can increase our exports. So we are reverting back to the initial approach. It appears as if India is going back to the previous approach, where we are looking at trade and investment together without delinking them or decoupling them. So that is what we learn from the FTA that we have signed with EFTA countries. So here the writer is suggesting that India should ensure that there is a FTA policy. Instead of following different approaches with different countries and reverting back on policies and approaches every now and then, which brings a lot of confusion and instability as well, the writer is suggesting that we should have a streamlined FTA policy. How exactly we will deal with trade and investment related issues? The writer does appreciate the flexibility that India has shown in the EFTA deal. If you look at the TEPA agreement, right? So India not only gave trade advantages and gained market access and made them legally commit to invest $100 billion in India, but we also gave some concessions. India has shown flexibility, especially when it comes to environmental regulation, labor laws, etc. Usually, India would oppose the norms of other countries when it comes to environmental standards and labor laws, because developed countries again expect very high standards of environmental regulation. They'll expect very relaxed labor laws that will favor the laborers. But a developing nation like India may not be able to implement such environmental laws and labor policies. So usually when it comes to any trade negotiation, India would take a very strong approach on environment issues and labor issues and oppose the stand of the developed countries. But this time we have shown flexibility. We have agreed to their environmental and labor standards, and in return we have pushed them to legally commit $100 billion investments and gain market access to both the sides. So that is the new approach that we are seeing. It appears as if India is reverting back to the initial approach where we coupled trade and investment. So now the writer is suggesting that there is a need for a 3.0 approach, a new approach, where there is a streamlined policy in place. There is a clear FTA policy in place. So the writer says we should negotiate one comprehensive treaty. The writer says it's not ideal to treat trade and investment separately, as we have done with UAE and Australia. The writer says it's better to look at trade and investment comprehensively and sign one single treaty, because you can use one advantage as a leverage to push investments into India. Given the size of the Indian market, right, by promising market access and by driving our own exports to their markets, using trade as an advantage, you can push some of the developed nations to bring investments into India, which is again a win-win scenario. Even the investors, the foreign investors will benefit, as India is a fast-growing economy. It will fetch very good returns for them. Plus, it will help us create jobs in India, drive capital creation in India. So the writer is suggesting decoupling is not a good idea. Looking at trade and investment separately, signing separate agreements is not a good idea, because when we couple them, link them together, we can use the inherent advantages we have in our economy, the market size of India, and offer the trade concessions and push the other countries to bring investments into India. So that would be a win-win situation. So that is what the writer is suggesting. But one other piece of advice from the writer is that India should not only try to push for investments, we should offer investment protection. We should not only facilitate investment, we should not only drive investment, but we should promise the protection for the investors as well. Because right now there's a lot of uncertainty in the Indian regulatory ecosystem. For example, if you look at dispute resolution or contract enforcement, right, or even the bankruptcy, insolvency codes that we have, or in general ease of doing business in India, it is still very complicated. So investors are risking their money here. So if you really want to attract foreign investments, drive capital creation, drive employment creation in the country, then you need to offer investment protection as well. There should be legal measures promised by India to protect the investments, to have better dispute resolution, right? So that is something India can offer so that we can attract more foreign investments, which is absolutely essential to drive India towards a $5 trillion economy. So there are some important lessons that we get from the trade deal, and that is exactly what the writer is also focusing upon. Is that clear? So you can expect a mains question here, maybe even a prelims question on some of the concepts that we have understood. So now let's look at the next article. The next article is also from Economy. On page 13, we have this article related to road construction, national highway construction in India, and the infrastructure model which is being followed. If you have seen GS paper 3 syllabus, under Indian economy, different infrastructure models is a part of our syllabus. Like for example, public-private partnership, build, operate, transfer, right? These different models which are used for infrastructure creation, it's very much part of our syllabus, and UPSC has explicitly mentioned that. So this article is dealing with infrastructure models which are followed in India's national highway construction. As you all know, the Modi government has set very ambitious targets to accelerate road construction in the country, especially national highway construction. And the Ministry of Road Transport and Highways has been giving utmost priority for building new national highways and expanding the NH network so that the logistics can improve, the transportation can improve, which can directly contribute to economic growth. So the government of India recently adopted a unique model of road construction, a road development model, which is called the hybrid annuity model. The hybrid annuity model. I'll explain what it is. Don't worry, I'll come to it. Recently, the government of India approved a new infrastructure model for road construction, right, and in general for infrastructure projects. This model is called hybrid annuity model. HAM, the HAM model. It is a type of public-private partnership. Hybrid annuity model is a type of public-private partnership where the government and as well as the private sector is equally involved. Both will bring the funds, both are involved in the creation of capital assets or in basically creating infrastructure. So the Ministry of Road Transport and Highways over the last 4 to 5 years has been driving road construction and expansion of the highway network through this model called the HAM model or hybrid annuity model. Now, according to a recent study, this model apparently is failing. It's not performing as well as the government expected. Because the study is citing data. The data shows that NH construction has slowed down over the last few quarters. From 34 kilometers per day, which was added in FY24, we are expected to see a slowdown to just 31 kilometers per day in the coming quarters. So clearly, road construction is taking a hit. Expansion of NH highways is taking a hit because of certain issues associated with the HAM infrastructure model or hybrid annuity model. Is that clear? So according to this research, which is brought out by a credit rating agency called CARE, the data says that execution pace has declined by 7 to 10% year on year. So compared to the 12,000 odd kilometers that's being added in FY24, we might witness only around 11,500 kilometers being added in FY25. So clearly there is a slowdown in NH expansion and road construction. There could be many reasons behind it. There could be many different factors which has led to the slowdown in road construction. One could be because the government has started preferring mid-level developers who may not have a very good credit profile. They may not even have the right capacity to execute such mega projects. Because the large, well-known, well-established developers, right, their cost would be higher. Also, dealing with the large developers has been challenging for the government. So of late, the government has preferred mid-level developers who are not really well established when it comes to infrastructure creation. So their credit profile is moderate or weak. They may not get easy loans from banks, so funding becomes a problem. Or they might lack the capacities. They may not have the right technology, the right engineers, architects, etc. So there could be a slowdown, a general slowdown in construction activity. So compared to them, large developers, well-established developers can do a quicker job and a better job. But the Ministry of Road Transport has often preferred mid-level developers, right, with very moderate profiles. So there could be execution-related problems or technical challenges or funding-related issues which has come up. So there are many factors that are responsible for the slowdown in road construction. But one important factor which stands out is the new model, infrastructure model that was adopted, which is the HAM model, the hybrid annuity model. So let's quickly understand what is hybrid annuity. See, it was launched by the government in 2019. In 2019, the Modi government approved the usage of hybrid annuity model to build national highways in India. So under this model, which is a type of public-private partnership, there is public funding, meaning there is government funding, there is government involvement, and there is private partnership as well. So this is in the ratio of 40:60. 40% of the project cost, right, it will be funded upfront by the government during the construction period. The government will raise public funds. The government will allocate public funds. 40% of the project cost will come from the government during the construction period. Remaining 60% will be raised by the private developer through a hybrid model. What is this hybrid model? This hybrid model combines two other infrastructure models, which is your BOT annuity model and EPC model. Has anyone heard about these infrastructure models? EPC stands for Engineering, Procurement and Construction Model. All right, BOT stands for Build, Operate, Transfer Model. Now let's understand both the models and let's see how hybrid model combines the two. See, in engineering, procurement, construction model, as the name itself tells you, the private party, the private developer, right, is just carrying out the construction of a project. The private developer involved, let's say for a road construction project, is only going to build the road. He's going to handle the engineering part of the construction, procure the raw materials needed and execute the construction, right? So from design to procurement to execution. Only this is handled by the private developer. So now the question is, who raises the money? Who gives the funds in EPC model? In EPC model, the government pays the private developer. All right, the government is paying upfront to the private developer. So government raises the money, provides the funds as well to the project developer as and when the construction progresses. The private developer is only responsible for engineering, that is design, and eventually executing the project, procuring all the raw materials, and finishing the construction. So basically finishing the construction from start to end, that is it. That is the responsibility of the private developer. Private developer need not bring funds, need not worry about maintenance. Now the question is, when it comes to such large public projects, who will maintain those projects? Who will take care of any repairs, any maintenance work? Who will collect the toll, right? Levying toll is a type of revenue generation which helps in maintenance work. So in EPC model, the private developer's responsibility ends with the handover of the project. Once construction is completed, project is handed over to the government. So now it will be the government's headache. Government will have to invest in maintaining. Government will have to look at toll revenue collection. Is that clear? So the government's responsibility increases, which could become a big challenge. So that is why EPC model has few shortcomings. The shortcoming is that, one, the government is funding it entirely. Government has to pay this upfront to the developer as and when the construction progresses, right? Private developer is only carrying out engineering, procurement, construction, handing over the project back to the government. Then government becomes responsible for the entire maintenance of the entire life cycle of the project. So that's an unnecessary burden on the government. right? It increases government's involvement in infrastructure management, which need not be the case. So there are some benefits in EPC model. The benefit is that it can incentivize the private sector to participate. Since government is providing the funding and later maintaining the project, and private developer is only constructing the project, there is an incentive for private developers to proactively participate. But drawback is that government has to raise the entire funding and government has to maintain and look after the project as well. All right. Now, let's look at the BOT model. What is BOT? Annuity model. BOT stands for Build, Operate, Transfer. So in this model, private developer will build a project, operate the project, maintain the project. During the period of operation and maintenance, they can levy tolls, generate revenue from there and use it for operations and maintenance. So after a certain lock-in period, they will transfer the project back to the government. So that is BOT model, Build, Operate, Transfer. So here, the private developer is involved for an extended period with the project. Their involvement does not end with construction. After construction, they're responsible for maintaining and operating the project as well, which reduces the burden on the government. Right? So they not only carry out the engineering, procurement, construction, but after construction, they operate and maintain the project for a certain number of years as per the agreement. So there will be a mandatory lock-in period. So after the lock-in period, they will hand over the project to the government. Even then, government can bring in other private players to manage, operate and maintain these projects. So it will reduce government's involvement, it will reduce the government's burden as well. So that is your BOT model. But here, private players are paid a prefixed amount as an annuity. In BOT model of funding, toll will bring some revenue. It will raise funds for the private operator, but that comes after the construction of the project. But before that, private players are paid a prefixed amount as an annuity. All right. So basically, again, there is part funding from the government, part of it, not entirely. Rest, private developers have to bring the money. They have to raise that money from the markets. So they have to take loans from banks, etc. So there is financial responsibility on the private developer as well. Whereas in EPC model, the government was raising the entire funds, later responsible for maintaining the whole project. So that way, private developers' responsibility was very limited. Correct? So in BOT model, there is a better sharing of the responsibilities. Government provides part of the funding through annuity model, right? Private sector also raises its funds through banks and through the markets. Later, private sector will maintain the project as well. That reduces the burden on the government. So these are the two usual models used in road construction. But now, India introduced a new model called HAM, Hybrid Annuity Model, which merged the best features of the two. All right, it's a combination of the two. Essentially, the National Highway Authority of India will pay 40% of the total cost of the project. Like for example, the EPC model. In EPC model, government is paying upfront. Right? Similarly, 40% of the cost is paid by the NHAI upfront as the project progresses. Remaining 60%, right? Remaining 60% has to be arranged by the road developer, like the BOT model. All right, and government will release those funds in installments. That is the annuity model. That's the mixture of BOT annuity with EPC model. So like EPC model, there is an upfront payment of 40% by the government. Remaining 60% is raised through loans and debts by the private developer, and government pays for that later through installments. So that was a fusion, a mixture of BOT annuity and EPC model. So later, after the project is completed, the private developer will be responsible for operating and maintaining it. That reduces the burden and responsibility on the government. So this is the hybrid infrastructure model that was pushed by the government, and it has been followed since the last 4 or 5 years. Initially, we did see a big increase in the road construction activity, but now it is faltering, it is slowing down. See, in the HAM model, there are definitely certain advantages. 40% upfront funding by the government, 60% by the private developer through loans. So this reduced the risk. It reduced the financial burden. It also reduced the operational maintenance burden as well. It brought the best features of EPC and BOT annuity model. But problem is that there is a serious problem which has come up. The problem is that the mid-level developers who are being involved, they are not able to raise enough credit. They don't have enough credibility. Banks are hesitant to give them loans. So frequent funding related issues have come up. So government is able to provide 40% of the funds, but remaining 60%, the mid-level developers are not able to bring it on their own. This is an inherent flaw in the model, right? If you're preferring mid-level developers and expecting them to bring in 60% of the funds, they don't have enough credibility in the market. Banks may not give them adequate loans, and this will essentially hamper the project. If you look at EPC model in that way, the government was raising the entire funds, paying the developers, so that project construction would continue without any impediments. But now there are problems coming up. Plus, even the government's budgetary constraints are a challenge, because the global economy is going through turmoil. Even the budget, if you look at the budgetary allocation, right, there is a certain constraint on the part of the government when it comes to allocation of funds for road construction activity. So all these challenges, they are hampering the effectiveness of the HAM model. So the article is questioning how relevant is the hybrid annuity model. Was it better that we followed EPC or bought annuity model, or is this model better? It's a comparison. See, there are strengths and weaknesses in every model, right? It is highly debatable again, but at least being aware of these infrastructure models will be very helpful both for your prelims and your mains. Now let's look at the next important article from page number 15. The article is relevant for international relations, internal security, and as well as for ethics, because this article is dealing with AI in warfare, the usage of artificial intelligence in military hardware, in military technology. The article is referring to the ongoing competition between US and China in deploying AI into military hardware. For example, recently the US successfully conducted an exercise using 2 F-16 fighter jets. Can you see the image here? There were 2 F-16s used in a simulated dogfight environment. One was piloted by a regular US Air Force pilot, but the other F-16 was flown by an AI. There was a pilot sitting for safety, but the pilot was largely a dummy. The pilot would not take over unless and until safety was at risk. This entire combat simulation was handled by a AI algorithm, right from takeoff to engaging the enemy to landing. The entire sequence, including the in-flight maneuvers, was executed by a AI algorithm. The pilot was just sitting in the cockpit doing nothing. So can you imagine what US has achieved? China is on par. China is doing something similar, right? China is also very keen on using AI in military platforms, from battle tanks to artillery guns to missiles to air defense to even submarines, aircraft carriers, drones, and fighter jets as well. Now, please understand the difference between autonomous military hardware and AI-driven military hardware. Both are very different. Don't confuse autonomy with machine learning-based AI-driven military weapons. See, for example, if you look at, let's say, any aircraft, right, be it a commercial plane or a fighter jet or transport aircraft, cargo planes used by the military, these aircrafts, they already have an autonomous feature, which we often call as autopilot mode, right? So this is something which is available in commercial planes as well, right? So don't think autonomous feature, autonomous flying or autopilot mode is AI. That's not AI. Because in autonomy mode of flying, you basically have a set of predetermined rules which are fed into the system, and based on that, it's a if and then situation, right? If you look at the algorithm, the flow chart, basically it's if and then. If this happens, the machine will do this. If this happens, the machine will do that. So that is not true artificial intelligence. That is simply autonomy, right? There are a set of pre-fed rules which basically the system is following, right? The system can't learn on its own. It can't come out with its own set of rules. It can't learn from previous experiences and do something new. That is not AI. In true AI, machine learning will be involved. where the algorithm keeps learning from the data, not just the historic data, but even the real-time data which is happening. The algorithm keeps upgrading itself, it will keep updating the rules as well, and almost in a human-like manner, the machine keeps learning and it will start performing that as well, right? So that is true AI. So machine learning and autonomy are two different things. So autopilot in your commercial planes, fighter jets, or transport planes, which is already available, right? That is not AI, that is simply autonomous navigation basically. So that is only about preset rules which are fed into the system, and accordingly the system will fly, right? So that's not a huge technological leap. But using machine learning to fly a fighter jet is something else. This is truly the next level in military technology. China is not far behind. In fact, US, China are already in a race in deploying AI tools into military hardware. In fact, there is a big history behind this. Since many decades, armed forces, especially US, China, and few others, have been trying to bring machine learning into military systems. For example, back in the 60s, through the Aegis missile defense system in the 60s and 70s, the US armed forces brought in autonomy and part of machine learning into air defense. Apart from autonomous functioning, where it could make independent decisions without human intervention, right? This air defense system was enabled with a part of machine learning tools as well, where it could learn from the real environment, from the real data which was coming in, and accordingly it could adopt and it could take real-time decisions without human intervention, and it could more effectively intercept enemy missiles. So since then, the US has made tremendous progress. So today the focus, especially when it comes to, let's say, flying a fighter jet, is to ensure that, one, there is safety, right? If you're using an AI to fly a fighter jet, there are multiple risks and concerns that come up. One is the safety of the jet. What if the AI malfunctions? What if it fails? What if it leads to an accident? Or let's say during exercises, during training, what if the AI jet crashes with another jet, a regular jet? So that results in an accident. What if it crashes into a civilian area, right? Or what if AI malfunctions and it autonomously launches an attack on friendly forces, on our own forces? Or what if it targets civilian population? Because even in target selection, such military hardware which are driven by AI will be making decisions on their own without human intervention. One main difference between a human operator and an AI operator is that the human operator will have empathy, right? You feel human emotions, and that plays a big role in any decision making, especially in a warfare environment, right? But a machine may not be able to think on these lines, right? They are not sentient. They're not able to process the human like emotions, and that might push machines to be more brutal in warfare, or they might make miscalculations, right? Or the data which is fed to them might be corrupt, or it might be biased, which pushes them to pick the wrong targets and launch an attack. So there could be deadly consequences for human rights. So there are a lot of ethical concerns associated as well with the integration of AI into military hardware, right? So now the US is really taking it to the next level. It's not just about flying the planes through AI. They're also focusing on how they can reduce dependency on GPS-based navigation. This is another domain where AI can perform tremendously well. Because as you all know, right, all fighter jets, even rockets, missiles, etc., they all rely on satellite-based navigation, correct? The US relies on its constellation of GPS satellites. Now, today, you all know that space has been militarized. In any conflict environment, most likely these satellites will be knocked out. Let's say, hypothetically, imagine a conflict between China and US, or Russia and US. They both have space military capabilities. Be it China or Russia, they will knock out some of the American satellites, either through a direct hit, or through a cyber attack, or through some kind of electromagnetic interference. So once, let's say, hypothetically again, right, we are just wargaming here. So hypothetically, let's say American GPS satellites are knocked out. So how will then the American fighter jets or missiles navigate, right? That is the eventual question. So this is where US Department of Defense and the armed forces are coming out with newer ways to navigate. They want to create resilience when it comes to navigation. They want to reduce the dependency on GPS-based navigation. So humans, right, we don't have any other ability, but machines have a great ability. The idea is to use the Earth's magnetic field to navigate. Right? The Earth's magnetic signature is unique, it is distinguishable, right? It can be identified and it can be used as a navigation aid. But problem is with regular instruments, right, that we have and a human pilot, we will never be able to distinguish the Earth's magnetic signature and the other electromagnetic interference present. But an AI tool has shown remarkable progress. The US DoD has tested this. This AI tool has clearly differentiated between the Earth's magnetic field signature and other electromagnetic interference. So basically what it means is that tomorrow you might have fighter jets, planes, right, which are flown by AI pilots, which can essentially use magnetic field of the Earth through magnetosensors and use that to navigate and fly without depending on satellite-based navigation. So in that case, even if the satellites are knocked out, right, even if GPS is not available, these AI-driven planes can still navigate precisely by using the Earth's magnetic field, because machines have the ability to separate the magnetic interference from the Earth's magnetic field, which humans can't do. So this is again remarkable. This will make aerial warfare foolproof. It will reduce dependency on satellites, which might be knocked out by the enemy in an actual warfare environment, right? So there are tremendous developments happening in the military domain, and the concerns are also coming up. The safety, security concerns, ethical concerns. This is what bothers practitioners and even activists. The safety and ethical concerns. How ethical is to engage in warfare by using AI tools which have no empathy, which don't feel human emotions? If these machines are killing people, it could be a civilian, it could be a combatant, doesn't matter, right? If machines are involved in taking a decision to launch an attack which eventually leads to the death of a person, right? How ethical would this be? They are not sentient beings like humans. They can't account for empathy. They could be easily susceptible for mistakes, malfunctioning, etc., right? So those are very serious ethical concerns which have not been addressed. Then, of course, there are safety concerns, right? What is the risk of accidents? What is the risk of friendly fire, right? What if the machine goes rogue, turns against and malfunctions, right? So these are major risk factors present. For example, in this test which was done, right, in the AI flown F-16, there was a pilot. Pilot could have taken over with the single press of a button. If required, the pilot could have taken over if there is any malfunction or any safety risk. So that feature was added. Plus, there are some limitations which are being fed in to ensure such AI military hardware is safe. There are few limitations which are fed into the system. For example, during flight, during an ongoing mission, it can't perform maneuvers on its own, or it can't learn from the real-time data. It can only operate based on historical data, so that in the middle of the mission, it will not malfunction, or it will not do something unexpected. So such limitations have been built into the system, but still there are many risk factors which are of course present that raises concerns about safety and, more importantly, the ethical question of using AI weapons in actual wars. So we are getting towards that future, that is for sure, but how will we address these issues? That is the question, right? So it's a very interesting, very important article according to me. This could again be a potential essay topic as well. An entire essay can come on this. So please be aware of these new developments, the recent developments that are happening. So the F-16 being flown through AI algorithm is indeed revolutionary. It's groundbreaking. All right, so that's why it's a very important topic. Now coming to the prelim section, we have few small articles. We can take a quick look. On page number 1 and 4, we have an article referring to the Vibrant Villages program. The article says that the government is going to spend 2 crore rupees per 1 kilometer of road, which will be constructed near the Chinese border under the Vibrant Villages program. So let's understand what is Vibrant Villages program. What is the significance of this program? This was announced last year in the 2023 Union Budget by the Ministry of Home Affairs. So the Vibrant Villages program is essentially a border development program focused on border villages located along the China border. So almost 2,900 plus villages have been selected under the project that are located in Ladakh, Uttarakhand, Himachal Pradesh, Sikkim and Arunachal Pradesh. So basically the states and union territories that border China, right, from Arunachal Pradesh to Sikkim, Uttarakhand, Himachal Pradesh and the union territory of Ladakh. So in these states and union territories, the border villages have been chosen, almost 2,900 plus, and 4,800 crore rupees has been allotted under the 2023 budget. So these funds will be used to fund infrastructure and development projects in these border villages. Is that clear? Now, it's very important to understand the purpose behind such a project, because we do have a similar project like this called the BADP, Border Area Development Program. The MHA has been implementing Border Area Development Program from almost 30-40 years across all the land borders. Initially, it was started in the 1980s along the Pakistani border, focusing on Rajasthan, Gujarat, Punjab, Jammu and Kashmir. Based on the success of Border Area Development Program, it was expanded to cover all the other land borders. The Chinese border, Bangladeshi border, the border villages near Nepal and Bhutan, Myanmar. So all the border villages of India are covered under Border Area Development Program, which is another parallel program. So don't think that the Vibrant Villages program has led to the scaling down of BADP. No, both are standalone initiatives. BADP is for developing border villages across all the land borders of India, including the Chinese border. But to pay special attention to those villages facing China, a separate program, a separate initiative was launched called Vibrant Villages Program. The logic here is that, one, it's very important to keep the border population in favor of our country, to ensure that they are patriotic, they have loyalty towards the nation. Because if you neglect the border areas, if you don't provide development, let's say you don't provide roads, electricity, you don't create jobs, you don't provide education and healthcare, the people will be affected, their quality of life, standard of life will be affected. Also in these remote border areas, there are many challenges because of the terrain, the weather, the disasters, etc. So if the government doesn't reach out to the border population and doesn't take care of them, there are chances the border population might turn against the country. Right? Ideally, in an ideal situation, we would want the border villages to be the eyes and ears of the government, the security forces and the intelligence agencies. If they spot any suspicious activity, right? If they spot any enemy movement, we would like the border villages to inform this to the intelligence agencies and security forces. Right? The government can't have eyes and ears everywhere. The border villages, the population there will be the eyes and ears of the government. To ensure that happens, you need to take care of the villages, provide development, and ensure that the border population is in favor of the country. Second, if the border villages are not developed, if they have no opportunities there, they might migrate in large scale over let's say 20-30 years. Entire families might move out to cities and other parts of the country to find better opportunities and better living standards. So this could depopulate our border villages. And this is a big risk, especially when you have a disputed border. Right? If border villages are becoming empty, right, if they are getting depopulated, then this could benefit the hostile neighbor. Their claims would be enhanced and India's claims could be weakened. So it's important to have a viable border population so that we can justify our claims, particularly when we have disputed borders. And also China already has a village development program called the Xiaokang. China has been pioneering these so-called model villages. Over the years, it has built new villages, brand new villages along the line of actual control. And it has even brought population from other parts of the country and forced them to settle in these border villages. So China is doing this as part of its strategy to enhance its claims along the disputed boundary. So Vibrant Villages program of India is essentially a counter to the Xiaokang village program of China. Right? Xiaokang or Xiaokang. So China has developed these moderately developed villages, or it has provided better infrastructure, better opportunities here. and it has set up these villages, bringing population here as well to justify its claims and enhance the claims. So that is where the Vibrant Villages program of India serves as a counter to it. So under this, we are focusing on road construction, border road construction, provisions of other basic facilities like electricity, water, basic education, healthcare, etc. So special focus will be paid to these villages located along the Chinese border through Vibrant Villages program. Next, on the same page, we have an article referring to rat hole mining. The article refers to rat hole mining, which is very rampant in the state of Meghalaya. So what is rat hole mining? That's what we need to understand. See, Meghalaya does have coal reserves, but however, it's not in viable quantities which can be commercially exploited. So large mining firms are not very interested, but there are few locals who resort to an illegal practice called rat hole mining. What they do is they recruit young children, or they even recruit the local people, right? And they dig these small tunnels or tubes into the ground so that only one person can basically crawl through this, and they try to extract the coal seams that are present. So such a method, right, which is done through such manual tunneling work, right, through manual digging and mining work, this is called rat hole mining, right? It's referred to a rat hole because if you look at the tunnels that are dug in, it's very small, very narrow, as if a rat has dug this, right? So it only fits one human at a time. One person can crawl through, right? So it's a very hazardous job, a very dangerous job as well, because many times these rat holes can collapse. Since there is no professional involvement, no safety measures, there are possibilities that the structural integrity could be compromised and there could be a collapse of the structure, thus trapping the mine workers. Or there are cases of flooding during rains and floods. Water can flood the rat holes and the workers trapped inside, they could lose their lives. There have been many such tragedies. Due to such collapse and rains and floods, there have been many instances where the coal mine workers are trapped, leading to a tragedy and a humanitarian situation. Plus, it's a huge environmental problem. Such constant rat hole digging, right, it could release harmful toxins and it could leach toxic chemicals into the environment, which could be hazardous to the ecosystem. So this has been a major environmental issue, right, a safety concern as well, and the matter has been taken up by the Supreme Court, by the National Green Tribunal, and even the state government has set up a committee on the directions of the Meghalaya High Court to look into the regulation and banning of rat hole mining. So just know what is rat hole mining, why is it a risk, why is it a concern. Next, on page number 11, we have a column related to Digilocker. What is Digilocker, what are the benefits, and what are the shortcomings? Digilocker is a digital governance initiative of the Government of India. It was launched in 2015. It's essentially an app and even a web portal where you can store all your documents, all your government ID identification cards, from your passport to Aadhaar, PAN, even your property registration documents. Any government issued document can be stored digitally on a cloud, right, on a public cloud, which is maintained by the Ministry of Electronics and Information Technology. So it's a flagship initiative of Ministry of Electronics and IT. It's a public cloud project, and you can store all your documents, retrieve them whenever you want. So you don't have to carry your documents everywhere. So from your passport to your Aadhaar, PAN card, everything, any government issued identification can be stored on Digilocker. So it's an app on your mobile phone, it's a web portal as well when you access it through a laptop or a desktop. All right, I'm sure many of you would be using it already. Now, what is the security provided on Digilocker? Because if we are storing all our identification documents on Digilocker, definitely there is a risk of our safety, our security and privacy being compromised, right? What is the level of cyber safety and digital security that's provided for Digilocker? Let's take a look. The Ministry of Electronics and IT has implemented all the standard safety measures. For example, high-level encryption has been provided. 2048-bit, 2048-bit RSA SSL encryption, which is one of the highest standards of encryption. Even supercomputers will find it hard to break the encryption, right? So such high-level encryption has been provided with multi-factor authentication in order to access the documents, right, to verify your identity. There are multi-factor authentication which is used, not just two-factor authentication. Apart from a regular password, right, apart from your OTP, there will be another factor, a third factor as well, which is used for multi-factor authentication, so that there can't be any unauthorized access or illegal access. So this in a way guarantees your cyber safety, your digital privacy as well. And there are many other measures. For example, let's say you have kept the app open for a certain time. There will be a timeout. Like for example, if you think of your banking websites, right, you might have experienced this. Your banking page will have a certain time. There will be a countdown. Maybe it will be active for 10 minutes or 15 minutes. And after that, if it's inactive, it will automatically log out. So that's a basic safety measure, right? So what if you log in and if you forget, someone else might access that. So if there is a timeout feature, after a few minutes, it would have logged out. So these basic features are built in. Regular security audits are done. The Chethan N, Computer Emergency Response Team India, which is the nodal agency for cybersecurity, which functions under the Ministry of Electronics and IT, conducts regular audit, security audit of Digilocker. All right, so there are many advantages. You can easily access all government services, facilities, submit documents when you store them digitally on Digilocker. Is that clear? So when you apply for a bank loan, or let's say when you open a new account, or let's say you want to get your passport renewed or buy a property, right? Anything becomes easier when you have documents stored on Digilocker. For example, the Digi-Yatra app, right? When you're taking a flight, your entire check-in becomes paperless and seamless if you have the Digi-Yatra with documents stored on Digilocker. So those are the benefits for the citizens. But however, there are some shortcomings as well. The biggest shortcoming is the user interface. The UI has been rated to be very poor. It's not easy to navigate on the app. Sometimes the OTP is not received on time. Sometimes there are challenges in uploading the documents, right? In retrieving the documents, many people have faced a lot of problems. These are basic design flaws in the application itself. So these shortcomings have been highlighted by the article. Plus, there could be concerns about cyber safety. As of now, we haven't seen any major attack on the data stored here, but you never know because there is nothing called foolproof cybersecurity. The question will always be there whether these security measures are enough, right? If there are any loopholes, vulnerabilities that will be exploited by the attackers. So that is something which should always be kept in mind. Plus, the UI interface, the overall usability has to be improved. That is the main shortcoming of Digilocker. Coming to the last article for today, related to geography, disaster management, there have been flash floods in Indonesia, in Sumatra, because of an active volcano called Mount Marapi. Mount Marapi is a very unique volcano. It's been very active in the last couple of years. So you should know where it is located, why it is in the news. There might be a basic geography question on this, right? So Mount Marapi is located in Sumatra, in West Sumatra in Indonesia. It is considered as the most active volcano in the Sumatran island, which is quite close to Andaman Nicobar Islands. And over the last 15 months, it has been erupting frequently. Apart from lava flows and apart from the eruptions which has happened, right, it has induced rains and lightning and even floods. Mudslides and landslides have become common in the volcanic region, and recently there were flash floods as a result of the cold lava flow, the pyroclastic flow which freezes over a period of time, right? It could lead to mudslides and landslides, and the gases which are emitted, it could increase the particulate matter aerosol concentration, causing rainfall, and it could bring flash floods that could lead to these disasters, secondary related disasters. So people of Sumatra are suffering from the impact of these regular eruptions, and so you should know where Mount Marapi is located. It's in West Sumatra, Indonesia. So this completes my detailed analysis of today's The Hindu newspaper. Please take a look at the practice questions. Write down the questions, use them to write an answer based on what we have discussed today. And I want many of you at least to post your answers, because this is the best way to practice answer writing. Just attend the class, watch the session, right? Use the same points, the structure we have used in the discussion, and write your answers. Because without answer writing, you can never do well in the mains exam. So I hope the initiative has been helpful, and I hope you have learned something today. If you did, please let us know in the comments. Do support us through your likes, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. So that is it for today. Thanks for watching. We'll see you tomorrow. Have a good day.